Hey there, this is CJ Miller. I'm in my apartment in Shreveport, Louisiana, and I have just finished watching American Horror Stories, uh, Season 2, Episode 1. It's titled Dollhouse. And, the returning or the most familiar cast member that I'm aware of is Dennis O'Hare. He kind of steals the show in this one, as he's apt to do often, chew up the scenery, as you will. Okay, so he plays a father who's an affluent toy maker. And this is set in the '60s, and it's set in southern Mississippi. Uh, Apparently, not too far from New Orleans, because he references, uh, you know, uh, yeah, the some of the etiquettes that you would find in higher class New Orleans of that time, So this is, and I'm gonna end up spoiling this episode for you. So if you don't want to get more into it, now's the time you want to just like maybe go watch the show and then come back and share with me your thoughts in the comments or something like that. But if you're familiar with American Horror Story, and then as kind of like the mothership, as they've said, and then American Horror Stories, each season of American Horror Story is roughly nine, give or take, to 10 to 12 episodes. Some I think there's been up to 13, maybe 14 episodes. I don't know. I remember the one season, the hotel. There were a lot of episodes, and then the first two or three, maybe four episodes were really, really long episodes that each one of them could have been, uh, TV movies in their own right, almost, uh, because they were like almost an hour and 45 minutes on the airtime and everything like that. So, uh, the first two or three certainly could have been like a mini series of the hotel. Those first few episodes, yeah. Anyway, but this, so some of the episodes of American Horror Stories will tie into the various seasons of American Horror Story. Each season telling a whole story, and then American Horror Stories airing on Hulu, not on FX. Uh, each one is a singular story. Each episode is a singular story. So, and then yeah, and it may tie in and it may not, but it's definitely going to have some themes in common, common props, common uh, dialogue sometimes or whatever. So when this character Dennis O'Hare in this episode called Dollhouse has an obsession with dolls. He's a doll maker, uh, and he has an obsession with the perfection of the porcelain doll, uh, liking it to man's evolution to or man's perfection, uh, whereas God has failed by giving humans flesh to sully and souls to lose and all that. Dolls don't have that, so that's his mentality, and it's because he's been jilted by a wife, and so he ended up throwing her and the lover that she took down a well. Uh, and then he gets obsessed with finding his son the perfect mother, the replacement, and everything like that. So what he ends up doing, you find there's been a group of women, and they've been kidnapped uh, and put in this giant life-size dollhouse, locked up on his property, and where they live, and where they are forced to compete in a series of contests of etiquette and perfection to so he can choose who is the perfect mother and who gets along with his son best and everything like that. And so the young son comes in, and he's in on it too. And they're forced to wear the little mask, the porcelain mask, and their little doll costumes, and the kind of the leader of the of the women who have been kidnapped, the one who kind of assumes, you know, everything. Uh, she has she wins over the boy uh, with, you know, what appears to be a magic trick. You know, she can make a toy truck roll across the floor. You know, and then she later on towards the end of the contest, she kind of, you know, when there's just three of the women left, she kind of stages a coup and manages to sneak out of the house uh, using some telekinetic ability, you know. And while the other women are escaping, she goes back for the boy because she doesn't want to leave him alone. And that is the, you know, Dennis O'Hare comes in and, you know, and the boy is like, uh, you know, zapped the woman, you know, who came back for him with an electric, like cattle prod or something like that. And just knocks her unconscious. And as she wakes up, she's on this uh, mold, this great big porcelain mold. He's gonna like put the porcelain mold around her body, and he's telling her, you know, what you've done is, you know, I've had speakers in some of the dolls that have been around the dollhouse, and I didn't hear all your plan, but I knew that you had something going on. But I figured I could make it a contest, and you, who came back for my son to put your life, your very own life at peril, you are the you know, the chosen winner of this contest, hands down. You know, so basically, we'll check this out. Basically, he cast her in porcelain, and so it's you know, and this whole episode was set in 1960s, you know, southern Mississippi near New Orleans and everything like that. So that, you know, um, there's definitely a tie-in, and if you're familiar, then you'll know that it ties in at this point to. I mean, it's pretty obvious that you first think that she's doing, you know, some sort of parlor trick or something, but you find out that no, she's got some sort of telekinetic ability. That's how she made the truck roll across the floor, and that's how she managed to get the locked door open. Uh, so anyway, uh, yeah, but it's all still maybe under the, you know, kind of low key what's going on here. You know, I mean, the gore factor is low in this episode, but at the very end of it, two women show up at the house, and they are dressed in magical cloaks, such as the coven would wear in at Miss Robichaud's Academy for exceptional young ladies in New Orleans in episode season 3 of American Horror Story. So to talk back and forth between these two shows, which do tie in together, it does get confusing. I do know American Horror Story, American Horror Stories, you know, but the plural stories is the one that airs on Netflix, and I'm sorry, it airs on Hulu, and has it does have a smaller budget for production and everything, but the set looked great. They did good work with the production and everything. It was just, you know, it's a smaller budget, and the stories are not as opulent or as grand. Uh, you know, they're much smaller in scope, so they can fit inside of a singular episode. But anyway, yeah. So here's the spoiler. You know, it's like she was a witch, and she just hadn't come into her power, and these couple of witches, they come to rescue her, and they're like, you know, we didn't detect your magic because they were weak. We didn't detect your spells because they were weak. You know, but it turns out, yeah, she's a witch at Robichaud's Academy, and so then uh, she takes the boy with her. Here's a twist. Here's a twist. She takes the boy back, and she's like, you know, you probably should not use your real name because people may come looking for you. You know, what's your middle name? And the boy tells her that his middle name is Spaulding. So they've done some retconning. And Spaulding was the servant from American Horror Story Coven. That's the you know, the third season, and he was a houseman, and he, uh, by the time they visit him, he had his tongue severed. Well, because he severed his own tongue, and he was obsessed with protecting the coven, of course, and uh, particularly Fiona Good, who didn't appear in this episode, but her rival uh, Myrtle Snow greets him, and so yeah, it's it's interesting. It's interesting how they play on this. They did some playing around, some retconning, because Spalding in American Horror Stories Coven maybe might have been. I mean, the younger version of him was still played by Dennis O'Hare, but they did a great job in de-aging him so that he could look younger, but he still seemed to be older than uh, some of the witches who were vying for the supremacy, uh, the head witch basically, uh, and yeah, it's really kind of neat. So what you want to do is you want to catch up with American Horror Story season 3, that's Coven, and then come back and watch this episode, and you'll kind of get Spalding's backstory, which I've just given you. But it's interesting. It's interesting. So I don't think this episode is going to win rave reviews, although Dennis O'Hare is very interesting to watch. The boy, it's okay, almost the emotionalness, but his devotion to the coven, uh, it kind of is evident. And they say, maybe they tell him to contrive. He's going to use his middle name Spalding, and he's going to maybe construct a backstory that he has always been, and his family have always been servants to the coven for as long as the coven's been there. So, uh, and to the rest of the world, they just know it as a school for exceptional young women. So, anyway, that's it. It was a I hope I warned about that. I hope that I warned about the spoilers adequately enough before you got into the video. If you care about that sort of thing. And I knew there was going to be some Easter egging, some hints, some maybe, but I didn't quite know that it was going to tie into the Coven season. I thought maybe it was going to be kind of like a mirror reflection of it, because Ryan Murphy and Brad Falchuk as writers and producers and showrunners and everything, they'll do that too. I mean, they'll like things that are not necessarily related, because the seasons do, some of them are responses to each other, and they're all within the same connected universe. But then some of the even though there are different stories each season, uh, yeah, they play around with that, but they also play around with just themes that have some common things, going on, some common threads. Some of the dialogue or the hints may be that, some of the props have been used in multiple seasons. There was a pig. There was a pig in the first season of American Horror Story, where the Dr. Montgomery was playing around with stitching the pig together and having some weird Frankenstein crisis of identity. He was a minor character in that first season, and then so that prop, the pig, later on makes an appearance, being hauled to a butcher shop, in on the street in Coven, just for a glimpse. So or some of the same effects, like someone's face gets like bashed in repeatedly or something like that. From season to season, maybe the same smashed face, uh, you know can be used, for practical effects and stuff like that. So you have to be really really keen to pick up on the connective tissue. Uh, some of the dialogue, like bitter disappointment. That's a phrase that's been used a lot in some of the earlier episodes or whatever. So yeah, it's at first you start thinking, okay, these are just like some common elements that are being recycled, but then you find out that the recycling actually uh, consists of Easter eggs that connects the various seasons and some of the shows of the singular episode in American Horror Stories. And this certainly maybe was there going to be some magic? Sure, the telekinetic and stuff like that. I mean, you sort of picked up on that, but you didn't quite know at one point. I mean, it kept you guessing for a little bit because it took its time to get to the connection, and that's where the twists of these American Horror Stories single episode anthologies are gonna get you, because not every connection is going to be obvious from the onset. I kind of figured she might have been a witch, but that doesn't necessarily mean she's going to connect to the coven. You know, Even though this is like some of these stories connect to American Horror Story, and some of them just happen in the same universe, but they're not necessarily uh, linked to stories that we've seen before. But this one most definitely is. And it's the backstory of Spaulding the butler from American Horror Stories. And yeah, I enjoyed it. I mean, I enjoy the entire franchise, the American Horror Story. I like a lot of what they did. So yeah, this is okay. So this is going to be one of these things where I would review it. Uh, yes, I would pay. I would view it on TV. I would stream it. It's a streaming, and it's a streaming with the satisfactory. I forgot my little ratings thing. Okay, I would tell you if I would where I would view it and if I would pay for it. That's basically it. So yes, stream, and I would pay for it on Hulu. You know, versus where would I view it? Like if it were a movie, uh, that whatever I was talking about, would I pay to see it in a theater? Would I see it standard? Would I see it uh, in IMAX, or would I pay the 3D IMAX, that kind of thing? And then yeah, so that's kind of where I go with that. Wherever the level of which that I would watch it means that's my rating, And here I would watch it at home on a great screen with a great, you know. They didn't really have like there were no like there some things you get like in Coven, you get those really whispery background voices and the water noises, and the water where it's coming out of a faucet sounds like yeah 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 yeah, and it could be water coming out of a faucet, or it could be voices or whatever, that kind of plays with that. Well, so this they didn't do that. There was a little bit of the theme from Coven at the very end, where they're outside of the Robichaux Academy, la 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 la. There's a little of that, so that's kind of cool. But that's just to make sure that you know what's going on there when you hear that theme. So, uh, yeah. So I'm still working out my ratings, how I'm gonna talk about things. Basically, if I'm talking about something, I liked it enough to sit through it. And so, yeah. Uh, yeah, I would pay the subscription price to view American Horror Stories season 2, episode 1, The Dollhouse, and gladly. And then yeah, that's it. That's a high review for a television program, and I love you guys very much. Uh, just for the humanity that's inside of you, and you have a lovely night. Follow your passions. Bye.